It's time to be woke. Take off your shades, it helps see through the smoke. Cause the wicked hide behind the cloak. And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog. What's real, what ain't? Is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy. It is Fuck It Friday. Sorry, I'm taking that one back. I know we were friendly last week, but both Carrie and I are in moods this morning. And, you know, we're going to give hell to the people that actually deserve to get hell. And we've got a shit ton of stuff to talk about this morning. So we're going to get right into it. And that starts with the introduction of my lovely and talented co-host, Miss Carrie Barber. Good morning, Carrie.
Good morning. Not feeling really lovely this morning, so I'm a little feisty today. So yeah, this is. I am
just you look marvelous. You feel like shit, but you look marvelous.
Well, that's really all that matters. Yeah. So it's just. I think what started it for me is this is Pride Month, traditional Pride Month in the United States. Hey, Amber. Good morning. And it's just another one of those performative things where a friend of mine posted a meme where, it's Pride Month, everybody's celebrating, and a bunch of corporate outlets go, I too am LGBT, or, whatever. It's just, it's all bullshit. And I'm so over it.
Yes. If you say LGBTQ at the cashier, you will get 10 cents off your Big Mac.
Right. I mean, can we not just be decent people? Why do we constantly have to be shitty? I don't get it. It's
I think people are trying to do the best they can with the propaganda machine that gets pointed at their ear on a daily basis, right? To sow division.
Oh God, it's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. So I'll say it again. The cost was tremendous. We paid in blood, sweat, and tears, family members, friends, during this pandemic. But the benefit, I think, and it's a painful benefit, is that all of the constructs have completely crumbled, and you can see everything for what it is. And Andy, you and I talked about it, like, we do what we do, and we are on the same level, if not better, because we always cite our sources and we encourage critical thinking. So we're always coming from a place of truth. So we are on the same level as an MSNBC, Fox News, whatever, but one step further. We do the old school journalism and try to maintain ethics. And all of that was because, the shittiness of their production value fell away during COVID, but people are still eating it up. And part of my complaint, this is not ego driven. It's all about getting the information out there. So even our brothers and sisters who mean well in the leftist podcasts, come on. Get your shit together, all of it. Get your shit together and start citing your sources. Do some homework, put some effort into it. God damn, I'm so tired of just hearing
and clean your room.
Right. It just do better. Quit phoning it in. Quit regurgitating the same opinion back to your audience for a little bit of grift. Really stop. And I get that we're in a different position. Andy and I are retired, semi-retired. I don't necessarily have to pay my bills with what we're doing here. It's a public service. But damn, I'm over it. And let me tell you what really set me off was, and this is our lead up for today's show. What set me off was I got an alert because I follow pretty decent journalists who actually still do the damn job. One of them is Glenn Greenwald, obviously. If you're not following Glenn, okay. Now Glenn's a little pretentious, but yeah, whatever. I'll give it to him. He's got, awards, big time awards.
Yeah. If he's
So,
pretentious, he deserves at least a little bit of it. Anyway.
wow. Well, you know what? It's not bragging if it's true, right? So
Exactly.
I'll give him that. I'll give him that. But I got the email, and he had put together this story. And as I was reading it, I was a little crushed. But at the end of it, I was like, okay, well, maybe since Glenn is telling the story now, people will actually listen. And here's why I was cringy, because it was the exact same fucking story I told February 2020. And it was the connection between the Wuhan laboratory and Bethesda, Maryland, and Virginia, and all of the stuff that we tell people we're not doing, but we're actually doing. And what I'm talking about is modifying some very, very serious biological weapons like anthrax, and trying to come up with ways to defeat them, so that we create the risk in a laboratory, and then we try to make sure we're the only ones who have access to antidotes. By all international agreements, treaties, and everything that we have said, we would not do this ever. And we're doing it. And this came out during the anthrax scare, but it was quietly hushed. And throughout this entire pandemic, Fauci and all the rest of them have been saying, no, we don't do this, we don't do this. And it was the same thing that we do where we say we don't have torture sites. But what we do is we finance and fund them in other countries and just send our people over there, our prisoners over there, to get tortured. So technically, we don't do it. Same thing that's happening on the border. We have outsourced death and misery to Mexico for all the people who are waiting on the border to come in. It's the exact same thing. Oh, the US doesn't do it. Biden's not. No, he sent more money to Mexico to have Mexico do it for us. So as I was reading Glenn's story, I was like, ugh. I said this on camera February 2020, but because Andy and I are not corporate sponsored, because we don't have multimillionaires funding us and telling us what to say, because we don't have a whole lot of subscribers, and this is where the people on the left really piss me off. We don't chase subscribers on YouTube. That's not what we do. We have reversed everything and still get the views outside of those corporate channels that you may not notice. But if you're a clout chaser and you're only looking at our subscribers on YouTube, you're going to look like, yeah, these people, whatever. And that's what's happening on the left, particularly on left podcasters. They're chasing that clout, they're chasing subscribers, and then want to cry and whine when a corporate-owned network starts to sabotage their efforts. What did you think was going to happen? Duh. Right? Yeah. And as a result of us not chasing that clout, we don't always get hurt or taken seriously and whatever. So shout out to Glenn, do your thing and run with the story. And I'm happy that it's finally maybe gonna make some traction. So, and then I also want to give a shout out to groups like Unicorn Riot, and they've been doing this stuff forever and really don't get the recognition that they deserve. Instead, we elevate these personalities and, like I said, clout chasers. And I'm over that shit. I am so over it. So
yeah, absolutely. I think that you and I are of the same mindset, that if we do what we do, we don't have to sell out. Let's call it what it is. And you and I have had this narrative since I've known you, that we always have to remind ourselves that you always take the high road, right? You make your decisions based on what's right and not what's beneficial to you. And if we're doing what we do and we have integrity in doing what we do, then I won't speak for you, Carrie, but I've always believed that eventually that will come out in the wash, right? That we are, with our integrity intact, if our voice was meant to be heard, it will be heard, right? We do what we do. We trudge along and do our job. And eventually, you know, if it was meant for you to be rewarded, then you will be rewarded. But, you know, that means that you end up at the end of this, whatever that looks like, with your integrity intact. And that's what's missing in journalism now, right? For the most part.
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely agree. And hey, Amber, she's weighing in here. I love the slogan. She says, "I saw a slogan yesterday, and I agree. Let's make Pride a riot again." And I am so down for it. So down for it. And then she says, "I love Glenn as well as Aaron Matei and Peter Lavelle." Yeah, there are some really great journalists out there who are doing the damn thing. Absolutely. And I think part of it is, and I'm going to say something, this is an unpopular opinion. And Andy, you and I have talked about it. We get so caught up in our little bubbles that we believe the rest of the world sees things the way that we do, right? And I made this mention of when I was talking about going on a panel program, and there were some high profile political pundits who are going to be on it. And I mentioned the name Jimmy Dore. No one I talked to knew who that was. No one. They're like, who? Jimmy who? And it reminded me, the same thing that I know in politics, that the world that we live in online in our little bubble is not reality. It's less than 1%. And so this is why Andy and I chose a different model, right? So we may not be popular in the Jimmy Dore space, those people who know who that is. But we are pretty damn popular in the space where we wanted to be. And that was, we are talking to our, for lack of a better term, Tea Party Trump neighbors. We're talking to our libertarian neighbors. We're talking to our leftists. We're talking to those people who are not typically politically engaged. And this is why we do what we do in a very casual setting, because we have expanded our network and our reach outside of what is traditionally the left. So for us in our space, it looks a whole lot different than what is typical, right? So
yeah. And I think that I think it's also important that, you know, there's a place also for the people that you're speaking of, right? Because if we can unite more or less with a singular voice in a way that amplifies everyone, then that's an absolute great thing. And I don't want to minimize the roles that anybody really plays in all of this, because I think they're all necessary, right? They may not be the exact same as ours, but the things that those people are doing, at least they are doing the lift of being there and trying to make change in whatever way they think that needs to happen, right? So I don't want people to think that we're minimizing those roles. The same way as when we say that if we want to make a more just society, that, you know, there is a role for electoral politics. It's not just grassroots. It's a multi-pronged attack. And I think that is the exact same of what we're talking about there.
Right. Okay. So once again, I want to point out that Andy is a far nicer, much better soul than I am. Obviously, refer back to what he just said, because while you were talking, I was like, fuck that. And I'm going to go back to get your shit together, right? Anybody can turn on a camera and put on a mic and stream, which is great. Do that. Absolutely. But if you're going to be talking about politics and you're not willing to do the hard work of, I don't know, how do laws work? How do I look up bills? How do I, if you're not going to do that piece of it, sit down. Just, I'm just not. I'm not, because you're clouding the space and taking on the same role as an MSNBC talking head, and I don't think we need that. But I'll defer to Andy. Andy's.
I don't do that. I think you and I can both have an opinion about something, right?
Yeah,
and
mine is not
you know
heavy.
that you know what I think of my talent level in this space, right? I'm the that I've always insisted that I'm the guy that goes and takes up a chair at the Oscars when the important person gets up and goes to the bathroom, right? I think that's just that's just my mindset of my own abilities or whatever. But
Right.
you know, it's everybody's got an opinion, and those opinions need to be heard. Some are more right than others, but you know, it's important that people share instead of just going in what you were talking about earlier, this, you know, completely sealed bubble of an echo chamber, and nothing ever gets out and nothing ever gets in, and you just, you know, get along to get along, and you know, you may figure out all the world's problems, you know, 5,000 times over in a certain period of time, but nobody outside of your group ever hears it, right? And I think that that's a major problem currently with the certain you know, with the platforms and everything that's happening right now. And I think that once we figure out a way to break out of that is when we start to move forward as a movement and actually make some, you know, real positive changes. My opinion.
We're getting there. I'm frustrated in the getting there. So one of the examples that I would put up, getting back to the Glenn Greenwald article about Fauci and everything else, is the same day that he came out with that, the Daily Beast immediately did a hit piece on Glenn Greenwald, and their big breaking scoop. And Aaron Matei jumped all over this, which I thought was hilarious. It was so mean girl. It was funny. Aaron Matei's like, oh my God, no, a journalist went on Fox News 72 times and gave that audience who is starving for facts and truth some truth. Oh. It was just like, first, Daily Beast, come on now. Yeah, shame on you. That's some bullshit. But I get why you do it, because you're being paid to do it. So you are now paid propagandist. You've outed yourself. If people hadn't caught it before, hopefully they caught it now. But this is kind of what I'm talking about, right? So just clouding space and trying to subvert the narrative so that people can't get to the truth and can't really understand what's going on. Because when you read Glenn's article, and there have been a couple that have come out when they talk about how the FBI investigation went down during the anthrax thing. Do you not remember any of that? It was some serious bullshit. So basically, they took innocent people, framed them for something because they couldn't find any evidence of who was doing this. And it was paper thin evidence. And as I'm reading that, I hope that people will understand that could be you. That could be you. You could be just doing your job, working in a lab or doing whatever. Next thing you know, you're being framed, and you're the scapegoat for whatever bullshit has just happened. So to me, there are so many layers to this particular story. And then for the Daily Beast to jump in and go, character assassination. No, that's not how we do it. So Fauci emails. Andy, you had something you wanted to talk about with Fauci's emails.
Yeah, and I think that my basically what I wanted to speak about with in terms of this was that the fact that we're seeing what's in these emails, you know, is obviously important. But the reasons it's important is because of the practices, right? And I forget what the expression is, where they take something that's bad and make it, see how bad they can make it, right? Which is exactly, you know, what the US has done, and likely what you know, Russian labs have done, and UK labs and whatever, that it's acceptable to do this. And they always say, well, of course we're doing this because the benefits of knowing far outweigh the problems that this could create, right? Well, if you were,
I'm sorry, gain of function. So thank you.
Thank you. That's the one. So if we're looking at it in terms of that, right? You may be able to have said that in February or March of 2020, but you certainly, after what we've seen happen in the last 16 months, I don't think that you could say that anymore, right? I think, but the point of me bringing this up is that let's take these emails and what we've learned from them and focus our view at that, right? It's not a place where, oh, you're going to, oh, Fauci bad, right? Oh, don't wear masks. Oh, like, let's make sure that the information we're getting from that focuses us at the positives and not at the point where we say, oh, well, look, see, the vaccine is bad because Fauci lied, and using it to propagandize the anti-vaxxer campaign or whatever it is, right? My whole push for that is, okay, let's look at what is wrong with the system, that you have mixed messaging from the American administration, despite who's in there, right? It's not just a Trump issue, right? It's a neoliberal issue or capitalism issue, right? And what we can do so that we don't have to go through this bullshit again, right? And not pick and choose and say, oh, well, look what he said about masks. It was totally wrong, right? I just want to bring that to the forefront, that we should be understanding what this means and not just allowing, a Russia style narrative where people can just pick and choose things they see and say, oh yeah, see, we shouldn't have even worried about it. Vaccines are bad. The whole thing was a hoax, blah, blah, blah.
Right. Exactly. And that leads into the two big stories that we're going to talk about. This is part of the critical thinking. Absolutely. And I think that Fauci's one of those. I'm like, why the hell is he still in charge, right? Unless he's getting cover. So I'm not going to analyze it. So you're right. It's critical thinking, and that's what we do here. So please come along with us on these next two stories, because it is full of propaganda, misinformation, some bit of truth disguised as something else, and then outright shit show when it comes to fiscal policies. So buckle up. Let's go. So the first one, and the reason why this particular episode is ridiculous, is because I think in the past, these particular narratives and ploys might have worked, but this is where I think the constructs have fallen apart, and you can see it for what it is. It is absolutely and totally ridiculous. So the first one up is we're going to look at Boston newspapers. This is Boston Globe and the Boston Herald. Boston Herald tends to be a little more to the right, not even center, but right. And Boston Globe is center. That is my opinion. But
just quickly before you start,
yeah,
I don't know what the Schrodinger's reference is, and I'm sure that most people do. If you watch The Big Bang Theory, you probably know. But Schrodinger's cat was, when you put a cat in a box, and when you consider the existence of the cat within the box, you have to consider it alive and dead at the exact same time, and that's the short version of that, right? But my favorite part of the reference to Big Bang Theory was when Penny said that, listen, if there's a dead cat in a box and it's the middle of the summer, it doesn't take long for you to know that there's a whole lot of dead cat in that box.
Right, and that's where we are, right? We're starting to come into summer here in the northern hemisphere. You should be able to smell the bullshit a mile away. So so this is why. Yeah, good explanation. So this is the duel between these two publications in the same city. So it's a pretty good example of the general public. You're going to get whiplash trying to, okay, so this one says this one says, who's right? And here's part of the problem with these two articles. They didn't cite their sources. They didn't link to the data, and they're just giving you primary opinion, but presenting it as if it's factual journalism. That's bad. You should not do that, right? So if it's an opinion, you got to put it in the opinion section, and you can say whatever the hell you want, good, bad, indifferent. But when you're presenting it as factual information, no, you can't do that. So these two articles where I thought it was very telling. So the first one that I want to tackle is this one by the Boston Globe, and it was a republish. To be fair, it was a republish from the New York Times from Jason DeParle, and he went out with the stimulus checks substantially reduce hardship, a study shows. And he mentioned the study, but did not link to the study. That's bad. So I had to go out and find the study for myself, right? And this one was a challenge. So I wouldn't expect the regular person who's trying to get kids together and trying to get to work and all of this sort of thing to have the time or wherewithal to find it. So that's a big problem. New York Times, Mr. Jason, don't do that shit. If you're going to cite your sources, you got to link to them. That's basic. That's basic information. So basically, he goes into some anecdotal things about how the 99% of us who went through this and we're getting behind on our bills, our rent, all of these sort of things. And he put some of those anecdotal pieces in there about how a $1,400 check helped them a little bit, but he didn't really expound upon it because $1,400, even if you're near destitute, it's nothing. It's gone like that. So so what he's trying to do is make the case that we need to do more of this, and he presents it as an article, not as an opinion, and that again is bad. So he keeps citing the source here, and if you look at it, and I went through it, nothing. There's nothing here. This is to me, okay, if I were an editor, I would throw this out immediately and write up this reporter. I'm like, this is high school level shit. You should know this. You should know this by now. We're not going to publish it, but this is what passes for journalism, apparently at the Boston Globe and the New York Times. So, ouch. So, okay.
Dems fighting voids.
Right. So then nearly, in the same context, you have the Boston Herald come out with this scathing report, because right now in Congress, they're debating, and this is Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, all of these folks talking about getting 2 more stimulus checks in the works. And I haven't seen a solid number on what they're looking at. Personally, just so we're aware, I agree. I think we should have been doing this every month. So in pushback to that, this article came out. There were a couple of them, but this one in particular by Emma Platoff. She actually works for the Globe. She came out with this report that said more than $1 billion in federal stimulus cash still unspent. And this article had me yelling at my computer screen where nobody's listening. Not because of her opinion, but because she also mentioned this study over and over and over again, and then mentioned a FOIA request. And this is where it really pissed me off. If you, for those of you who don't know, a FOIA stands for Freedom of Information Act. Here's what's supposed to happen. If you're a journalist and you request through Freedom of Information Act, going back to the Fauci emails, that's how we got them. A publication had put in a FOIA request and got these emails. And what did they do? They made it public. Why? Because a Freedom of Information Act is a law that says it's under the public domain. So as a publication, a journalist, you're supposed to take that FOIA material, and if you're going to write about it and publish it, you have to make it publicly available. Make sense? Well, Boston Globe didn't do any of that shit. None of it. They mentioned it over and over and over again. Never once published a link to where this data was. They talked about all of the stuff that was in there, that people aren't cashing their checks, and therefore, if your neighbor two blocks down the street didn't cash their check, You don't deserve one either. It's a waste of money. And oh, by the way, deficit. Hold that thought, Amy. Hold that thought.
I'm with you.
Okay. So my problem with this is, why would I believe anything you have said here? Why would I believe any of this data that you could have just typed in numbers and you neglected to put out your FOIA data? To me, that's a huge red flag. Not only is it lazy journalism, but it's an ethical issue. And that's exactly what happened here. So one link that she did put in here was a link to the IRS. Now, for those of you who are not aware, the IRS is the mode by which these checks are being sent out, because we have to match up, who are you? What is the last known address that we have for you? And they're sending them out. And that was the easiest apparatus to do that. So she posted a link to the IRS, who forwarded it to her, said, hey, if you have any information, here it is. It's publicly available. Well, when you go out to that link, this is where I about fell out of my chair. So the IRS explains why there are all these checks that haven't been cashed yet. They're still sending them out. Right, it is in the first paragraph. They are on the 9th wave of sending them out. So keep in mind, tax day just passed. So all of us had to get our tax returns in there, and it's the complete shit show that we have every year, where we can't add, we can't subtract. Some of us are trying to game the system. And oh, by the way, we cut the IRS, not only head count, but their budget. How many times? This goes back to the Republican mantra of take the teeth out of regulatory agencies. So this is our IRS. So we have given them this mandate to send out these checks over and over and over again. At the same time that they're trying to tackle taxes and do all of the regulatory stuff they're supposed to do. Meanwhile, this Boston Globe reporter apparently has never heard of tax season before, or doesn't know how these things actually work, didn't bother to check on it, did link to their page where they clearly state why we're doing this, where we are, and how we are really struggling to find certain people. Oh, by the way, people who are now homeless and have been evicted during this entire pandemic. All of that's right there on the IRS's page. Now, obviously, I'm paraphrasing. They said it much nicer, but it's here. So what this reporter did was, in a snarky bullshit kind of way, said, well, the IRS just gave me this link, included the link, which completely negates everything that she had written before, talking about why stimulus checks are not needed. So let's go back to the deficit thing, because she actually calls out, wow, she actually calls out the fact that we don't need more stimulus checks because the federal deficit.
Have you ever tried to do anything really fast when you're still running Windows 95?
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Let's talk like let's be serious. When you talk about government run agencies, they're using antiquated computing systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when they upgrade to something that was obsolete 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's.
And I'm not just being, trying to be funny by saying that. That's actually very true.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely true. So you hobble the agency and then complain that it's not doing things that you would want it to do. And this was, I thought it was very unfair, disingenuous. So if you happen to live in Boston, man, you have my empathy, because these are the two big publications that you have out there to get news from. And what do? Right? So you've got these two. And if you're not thinking critically about how they're writing this and what they're saying, it would be very easy to come away with the opinion that, well, maybe we don't need these stimulus checks. And the article actually called it Bailout Bucks. I'm like, how much more incendiary and derogatory could you be?
And like that's absolutely horrendous, right? And there's always needs to be pushback on that statement, right? Because it's not a bailout, it's an emergency payment, right?
Mhm.
You bail out the banks when they create so much fraud that they're about to they're about to destroy themselves. You don't bail out human beings, you keep them alive, right? Let's be clear about that. And you and I have just recently we had Rohan Gray on and we were talking about the CARES Act and the stimulus and all that, and the ABC Act that he helped craft for members of the squad, that was basically a way to get money direct to the people right away when they needed it, and not trying to rely on an antiquated system like the IRS uses, right? There's a lot of pushes that were like, well, let's just give everybody a account at the Fed, so you could just pop money in there so that they can access it instantly. Or the things that Rohan was saying, let's mail out a pre-loaded plastic money card with the amount that you could use, and just send it to everybody that needs one. And a lot of the pushback on that was, oh, well, what happens if we give them to people that don't need them or don't exist, or they're not Americans or what have you? So the entire narrative of saying that is that for the handful of abuse cases that might occur with this type of payment, it's worth it to not do it, to help tens or hundreds of billions of Americans, because of the handful of times that it might not be needed for people.
Exactly. And that is the case that they're making. So real quick, I want to get to Holly and Amber. So good morning, Holly. Holly
and Amber, that's a very Christmassy combo.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Almost makes me feel just a little bit better, a little happier, puppies and kittens. But Holly says 4th round. I'll believe it when I see it, and girl, right? So we'll see. But that's what they're arguing about. Like, how dare you even ask for anything more? And then Amber, yeah, I feel you on this one. She says, taxes were so confusing this year. Even HR Block got my return wrong. Mine too. And state of Illinois had to come back and correct me. Not in my favor. But and then she says, the IRS recalculated on the fly and sent me a lower return. And she said that doesn't happen normally. You got your return from the IRS. I still haven't gotten that one yet. And then she said, she's talking about the Bailout Bucks. She says, Bailout Bucks my ass. Oh, we even got Amber feeling a little spicy today.
Ooh.
So Amber says that puts the blame and shame on people who had nothing to do with creating the COVID crisis. And that's exactly right. So it goes back to the welfare queen narrative that you were talking about, Andy, right? So Bailout Bucks, and how dare you want to feed your kids, or how dare you want to keep your business open?
Right. It's along the same lines of calling something a payment to help people survive, as opposed to an entitlement. Right.
Oh, yeah. And so this reminds me, this is why we do what we do. This is why we suffer through idiots, right? There's a German phrase, don't let the assholes get you down. And this is why
will you please learn the German part of that? I will. Huge fan of the German language. It is in your face, and
yes,
and just a joy to listen to, as far as I'm concerned. Right.
Very direct.
I love that. Video meme that came out a number of years ago that they had people that were saying words in English and French and Italian and Spanish. And then the last one was German.
Yes.
Right. And it was so funny to me because of the how all of the languages are connected, right? For the most part, with the exception of the German language, right? And so the word, I remember it very clearly, that the word was ambulance, and the English person says ambulance, and the French person says ambulance, and the Italian person says ambulancia, and the German guy says Krankenwagen. I love that.
Right. Yeah, they get you going. They get you going. Yeah, I'll get you the German because yeah, it's much better in German. It's you know what, get your shit together and just don't let them. And Amber says the Germans have the best things. Oh, they do.
That's right. That's right. And all you need to do is point to Oktoberfest.
Oh, yes, there's that. Okay, so the last point that I want to make on this particular article, and this is Joe DeWinnell, if he wants something super, super neoliberal snarky, and he's the Bailout Bucks guy. Yeah, so one point that they neglected to mention is the reason why some of the bailout hasn't gone through, particularly in your states, in the last year, the money that was gone to the states and your municipalities is because the rigor and loopholes that were connected to all of this money, a lot of them still haven't spent it, and they themselves got a year extension on their deadline to do this because it was such a shit show with who could get what and how they had to request it and all of this sort of stuff. So if your state government can't get access to their money or get it distributed, why are we picking on poor people, right? Particularly people who are struggling, people who are behind on rent, who've been evicted, all of these things. If a government agency with a whole host of people working on the issue can't get it done and need an extra year. Okay, so anyway, yeah, shame on you, poor people. So that was Act 1 of our ridiculousness. This next act, I think everyone's to me it's a little scary, and you gotta laugh because it's so absolutely ridiculous and horrific. So let's talk about the food supply. The food supply and Tyson Foods in particular, because they have set themselves up to be such it's just utterly ridiculous. So hey, Oz is back. Hi, Oz.
The Oz man cometh.
Yes, good morning. Hi, Andy. All right, Oz.
He's my friend. Get your own.
Right. Okay. Hi, Andy's friend. So thanks for joining us this morning. So, Andy, if you wouldn't mind, please, this next ridiculous graphic.
It's up.
Okay. I can't see it. So
no problem.
Oh, yeah. So this one, what I did was there. I don't know if you remember this, but back April 2020, the CEO of Tyson Foods took out a full page ad in newspapers all across the country. And this particular picture I got from a journalist, and I put the link in there. So thank you for capturing this, because here is the spread in this particular newspaper where you've got the Tyson CEO talking about the nation's food supply is about to break. Oh my God. Right. And we'll get to why that's ridiculous in a second. But he put that ad in papers all across the country. But on the opposite page, it says workers say meat plants push them to show up while ill. And if you recall, we were also seeing headlines and reports come out that managers of these plants were taking bets on which of their employees would die. So they weren't giving them proper PPE. They weren't following even basic guidelines about communicable diseases and all of these sorts of things. The plants workers themselves had to deal with, you thought Amazon was bad. Wait till you see what goes on with some of this shit, right? So all of that's happening during a pandemic. And then you have the Tyson CEO crying, right? Oh my God. Well, you created the issue. And it cascaded down. Bullshit at the top grows exponentially as it goes down. So if you are creating a culture as a CEO and an executive where you don't give a shit about your workers and they are fully interchangeable and, oh, that guy dropped dead, just drag him out back, we'll get another person in here. Then what happens is every management level down the chain, particularly when you're dispersed in different states, it gets worse and worse and worse. So Tyson and their CEO, and let's be honest, it's not just Tyson. These are meat producers all across the country who are guilty of this. Now my dog is barking. Sorry.
If you want to mute and yell at your dog, go ahead.
Okay, I will do that. So, Andy, do a show tune.
J. Okay. All right. Oh, and here it comes. And the dog's life has just flashed before its eyes. And Carrie, we're going to see if Carrie comes back. And
You're
if the
so
barking.
wrong. None of that happened. He runs everything. He absolutely runs everything. So,
it's all about appearances, Carrie.
Perception's reality,
Yes.
which gets us back to our story. So, yeah, so all of this is going on with Tyson. So here's where I want to bring it forward, right? So we have 5 companies who are running all of our meat production. They were super thrilled to have Trump lift the moratorium on sending our chicken, sending our chicken to China for processing. Do you remember that? Does anybody? That was like 2017, 2018, and everybody went, yay. I have to cough again, sorry. My apologies. But they were benefiting off that. And then no wonder that the supply chain broke, because you dispersed it globally, you outsourced, offshored all of the stuff. And oh God, I got to cough again. Sorry.
It's okay. Well, let you clear your throat. Yet, let me take it from here, because when you look at the, like even the iPhone, right? The iPhone is made from parts from 34 different countries, right? And all of those countries were affected by the pandemic in different ways, right? But they're from everywhere in the world. And when you see that, you can understand why there was a shortage of iPhones, right? Because just one of those countries shuts down its production because it's trying to keep people whole, unlike places like the UK or the United States or what have you. Then of course you're going to have shortages, right? I remember at the beginning of the pandemic back last year, I needed to upgrade my video camera because the one I bought was just a quick one that I found in a store to buy. It was cheap and I just needed something for Zoom calls. And when I started to do this, it was horribly inadequate for what I needed. I couldn't find one. You couldn't buy one used. It's because the parts for them were not available because they were made everywhere, right? And we're seeing that, and people don't realize. But one of the things in how the change in production of large corporations is that they see inventory as a cost, right? You look at a unnecessary cost of large inventory. Had many of those places had an inventory where they could have been able to keep making parts like iPhones or cameras or what have you, they would have been able to continue doing so. But because they see it as a cost, they have just enough to make whatever they need for a short period of time and quickly ran out. And of course, then we don't have the ability to buy one because they're simply just not around.
Good point. Good point. Amber, thank you for your she says eucalyptus oil. So okay, I got you. Thank you. And then yeah, Amber, we just had Amber on talking about semiconductor shortage. So if you missed any of that, go back and watch it. It was she wrote this one beautiful piece on it, and I think it really ties into this particular conversation about supply chains. So in the Tyson thing, the thing that the Tyson CEO doesn't tell you is at the end of it, he says all of this meat is going to go to waste. They don't tell you about how much meat they actually waste daily. So yeah, and here in cattle ranch country, the part of the problem is when you have a heifer, a steer that gets too big, you miss the window of meat production. Right. And I'm old school poor people. Corned beef came from the toughest cut of beef. This is why we pickled it. so I have little understanding of when a cow is too old to go to the butcher. but apparently this is the prime cuts, and those prime cuts are going to the 5-star Michelin restaurants and all of those people. So they don't like their tough beef. So we just have to slaughter and waste that cow.
Apparently, they're deemed to be too old when they wander off in their housecoat and slippers.
Be on the lookout for Grandpa Cow and the slippers, right? So, and then Holly brings up the connection Africa, China, U.S. Yes, absolutely. Amber says you also have situations where foreign policies will incentivize certain countries to hoard chips and supplies. Absolutely, and that is what's happening in a lot of different areas. So with this whole Tyson thing, what I thought was kind of interesting is just this week, you had yet another meat producer have to admit and put out a public statement that they had a cybersecurity attack. So if you recall, the pipeline on the East Coast, the oil and gas pipeline, they had a ransomware attack. And that lasted for several days, drove up prices, and you saw people standing in line at the gas station with their little, containers trying to either hoard or get gas so that they could get to work. Well, then here comes this other one, JBS USA, and they operate out of Brazil and several other countries. But they had a ransomware attack here. And so to me, when I read this, I was like, okay, so you have all of these CEOs whose compensation is tied to quarterly, not annual, but quarterly profit margins, and they cut back. And here's a story, and I put this on my Facebook page. So I used to work, and I'm going to name names with this one because it's all true, verifiable. I used to work at NCR Corporation, National Cash Register, one of the largest IT support companies in the world. 133 countries, it's huge. And if you've ever flown and done a kiosk, or if you swiped your card at a retailer, if you go to a gas station, you name it, from trucking to food production to retail to transportation to leisure and entertainment, NCR has a huge share of the customer base. And so they're managing IT and data and analytics and all of this sort of thing. We had a CEO by the name of Mark Hurd, H-U-R-D, Mark Hurd. Guy was an asshole. Oh, and I got some shady stories about that dude. But what's relevant to this story is he came in, and we had it's an IT company, so obviously you would have some of the leading edge, world-renowned IT support, not only for the company itself, but for external facing customers. You had to. That was your thing. And he came in and said, this direct quote, he said, "We have gold level IT, and we can no longer afford gold level IT." And then what he did next was gut the IT department budget, everything by 50%. 50%. And we went from 65,000 employees down to, I think at the end of that year, it was like 38,000. It was just this massive bloodletting, massive. Well, he got a bonus because it raised the stock price. Even though the quality and service went down, even though security went down, he got his bonus. And he stuck around for a little bit longer and then took his golden parachute and went on to other IT companies. So I bring this up not just to vilify this asshole, but this is what was happening in corporate America year over year over year. These CEOs have an average lifespan in their job, their current job, of 2.3 years. This means that they come in, they rape the entire company, walk away with their incentives, their stock, and all of these sorts of things, and don't have to live with the consequences. So what we're seeing is this IT security all across the board. And when we have deregulated, when we don't have any requirements for, the 5 companies who supply all of the meat production to the entire nation, when we don't say, hey, maybe you invest in some IT and maybe we'll assist you, or however you want to put that together, this is what happens. right? So they have cut back and cut to the bone because they're on this quarterly measure of profits. And you know, you as a US citizen, you're not off the hook on this either, because we've driven everybody from the pension to a 401k. So now you have to play the roulette wheel with your retirement. So you want these companies to have a higher stock price and you want the valuation. Well, this is the consequence of it. When they're cutting back like this, just so that you can make your extra, you know, $100 this quarter, this is the consequence. There's all of this interplay. So this is what I saw with the JBS cybersecurity thing. And they had to come out and say publicly, yeah, we had an infrastructure issue and we ransomware and all of this. This further illustrates how tedious the situation here is in the US with the consolidation. So I can almost hear Sherry Weiss talking about antitrust. And so the consolidation, deregulation, and then this drive for quarterly profits instead of quality. Used to be made in the USA was the hallmark of a quality imprint. Now, not so much. And in fact, made in the USA doesn't really mean made in the USA anymore. So that is why I wanted to feature the story, because it goes back to not only the quality issue and the cause and effect of unregulated capitalism, but here and again with the JBS story, as soon as they came out with this, CNN was right behind them screaming, oh my God, Russia hackers. Nobody fucking knows where these hackers live. But why is CNN still with the Russia propaganda? So both of these stories, when I talked about the Boston newspapers and shitty journalism and not doing it ethically, and then you got CNN on the back here, they missed the lead on it, which in my opinion is the cybersecurity, the quarterly measures, all of these things that we're overlooking in our supply chain because CNN is so invested on this Russia thing.
Exactly. And it's the exact same reason why we shouldn't be looking to the Fauci emails to look back in time to place blame on something simply just to do that, right? Because the problem with the Russia narrative is if we can distract you with that, okay, we can maybe imply that Russia was a bad actor in there, but you're looking backwards. And what is knowing that going to do for you? Absolutely nothing, right? It's not going to make any substantive changes in the United States that helps people. It's just going to lay blame on something that happened in the past, and it's a distraction, right? Which is why we have to be leery of these narratives.
Mm-hmm. Question everything. And I know that, like I said, people are just trying to survive. I get it. And we're here to try and help you a little bit. Like this is why I always post the links, post the citation of sources, because I want you to question it. And when you have time or interest, go and read this stuff, because we need you to think critically about it. And it's not that I want you to be cynical. I want you to see things for how they are, not for how you want them to be, because that's how we get through this. You will be able to see these things coming a mile away and be able to make better decisions about what's going to be best for you, your family, your community, based on factual information rather than what somebody else is just putting out there, marketing pieces. So that is the goal. So Amber said, Amber, which one is this? Maybe she left to get more coffee or whatever she's doing this morning. She says, one of the largest meat companies in the US is owned by China. Which one is that? I'm not sure. You got me on that one. If somebody else knows, type it in the chat. I would love to know which one that one is, because I'll be honest, I didn't do a deep dive on all 5 of the companies. So that would be an interesting tidbit there. So I will say, anecdotally, when I look at the meat supply thing, Facebook is a useful tool for this. I found, so you have the urban centers, and then just outside of that, you have a bunch of family farmers, not corporate farms, family farmers. Oh, Smithfield is what she says. But what I did
That's a
when
very Chinese name, by the way.
Smithfield, yeah, it sure is. Yeah, Joe Smithfields. That's where that comes from. So, but you can find local farmers. More people are starting to grow. They have chickens and all of these sort of things. But if you're looking for the best steak or pork or whatever it is, find your farmer. You might have to drive about an hour, but there's a family farm and then a processor, and they're local to you. Find them. They are more than willing to split. Like I bought a quarter of a cow, and that was enough for a year. Put it in my deep freeze, and it ends up being about $2 a pound, as opposed to going to a grocery store where I was paying $9, $10 a pound and couldn't afford it. And I could request ground or, occasionally a steak, all of these sorts of things. It's if you step back a little bit and support local, sometimes there's a benefit to you. And if you cannot afford a quarter of a cow, you can go in with friends and neighbors and make it even more affordable, so you're paying 50 cents a pound. So there, I just want to consider.
I'm gonna have to push back on that a little, Carrie. Nobody makes a better steak than me.
Yeah, exactly. So, no,
I have to say they're tremendous.
Yeah, yeah. So, oh my God. Okay, so we did the story on Wednesday of Trump coming back. And now Jake Tapper, I was laughing at this one. Jake Tapper is all over that story. He's like, serious as a heart attack. Oh my God. Trump is asking people if it would be okay if he came back. And do they think it'll, I'm like, Jake, run with that story. Go for it. Chase your tail. Do what you got to do. So, yeah, that is the week that was. So we are after the top of the hour. Oh, thank you. Amber posted a link to Smithfield Foods. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. And also for everyone who is watching this week, we really appreciate the support. I've said it before and I'll continue to say it. Our audience is just off the chain smart. You're wicked smart.
That's right. SMRT.
Yes, exactly. So we very much appreciate you tuning in. If you have topics that you want us to cover, please feel free to send them in and we'll do a deep dive on it. We'll have a discussion. If you want to push back on something that we said, absolutely. Happy to have you here and do it. Next week, we have a couple good topics, but I'm willing to trade if you have something that you want to talk about. But
I don't think in the current environment, we're ever going to run out of topics.
I know. And that it's like you've got to sort it through and prioritize. But Friday next week, I'm not going to name names just yet, but we have an absolute legend who will be on our show. And I am super excited because this is one of my all-time favorite musicians who was part of some really big musical, I don't want to call them musical acts, bands that are on my playlist right now. Absolutely. I am so thrilled that is coming up next Friday. So stay tuned for that one. Yeah. So is it Elvis? No. No, Elvis is not on my playlist. Sorry. Not at all. At all. So all right. So all right. Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Oz. Thank you, everyone else who was tuning in this morning. We see you. You're awful quiet. Feel free to jump in next week. Join the comments, conversations, and all of that sort of thing. So Andy, you got any words of wisdom for this coming weekend?
No, I'm just going to encourage people to try to stay alive. That's about it. Enjoy your weekend and put your feet up. Relax. do some things around the house. Enjoy the nice weather if you're in the northern climes like I am and like Carrie used to be, because it's an awful long winter and we have to cherish the good weather when it's here. Have a good one. We will see you here bright and early on Monday morning. Take care.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone. We out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Herald the dog, we keeping it G.